Second watch.
What's
Hey,
going?
hello. Welcome to
What's?
Second Watch. 10 o'clock, Friday night. Second Watch. We're here. How's it going,
Yeah, how
Matt?
it's going? It's going. I'm glad to see some people here. Thank you for joining the conversation. We got a lot
Yeah,
to talk
hello.
about tonight.
We do. We have a ton to talk about. Actually, first off, did you game this week?
Yeah, actually, there was a lot of that.
Good for you,
The
man.
There was a guy from the Discord server has been running a Monday night hostile game. That game is starting to pick up speed. We only played for like an hour and a half. I think I may have mentioned this before. And we're at a point we left on like this cliffhanger, and I have a feeling we're all going to die next session.
Right.
Basically, these six dudes have been possessed by some alien intelligence. An alien virus showed up at our ship, armed to the teeth, and we have like pistols. So we're, so we're screwed there. And then, of course, there was the row this week. That was interesting.
Yeah. It what do you mean? You said it like it was bad. That
No,
was
no, I didn't mean it was
interesting.
bad.
Well, yeah, I thought it was good and I had fun. I keep this week my not my downfall, but I underestimated players who were able to hop, skip, and jump a couple of encounters before they just went straight for the main bad guys.
Right.
Um, which was silly because you guys were supposed to be worn down by the time you got in there. That obviously didn't happen. But overall, I thought it was fun. There's a couple things brewing. Man, I want to know, and we can talk about this. Might be a subject for a whole podcast. But what do you got to do? Well, maybe we should save this. I'm not sure. I can get. I have yet to have a moment in this game in the 4 or 5 sessions we've played where all the players go, "Oh, let's go do this right now." I want, you know what I mean? Like they're not like, "I know what's going on." Everybody's so cautious. It's almost like we're dungeon delving. Like everybody
Mm-hmm.
wants to pull their 10-foot poles out, and make
Yeah.
sure everything's okay before, and it's just like, go get it, But
Right. Well,
right now,
that's why I was like at the end of the session, near the end, I was like, everybody get to the lab. We
yeah,
have to
yeah, yeah.
discuss this. We have to get on the same page because everybody's been off
You froze,
doing
Matt.
their own thing. You got landscaper at the public library wearing his gas mask, frozen.
Yeah.
Um, but and then Raman is doing his like mystical research. I'm trying to figure stuff out. I actually think I'm starting to get a handle on what's happening here, but it's all hypotheses, and I want to have a game plan so we can start narrowing down what,
Right.
because right now I sort of feel like we're just bumbling into stuff. So
No,
um,
well, the first session was absolutely all bumbled into a thing, right?
yeah,
For sure. And then there was only one other. There was an encounter that I had planned so that something else could happen. Yeah, I'm trying to fight. There's a couple clues. You guys almost have what you need, and I'm pretty excited about it. We'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Next week should be, or not next week because we're taking a break because of vacation, Valentine's Day, anniversaries, things like that.
yep, yeah.
So we'll see about that next week. Um, so for whatever reason, this week on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, Matt, out of nowhere, you decided for no good reason to
Wanted to
make an
stir the
attack.
pot. I
Yeah,
wasn't
on the
attacking
5 room
anybody.
dungeon. You were attacking the
No, I
5 room
was. I
dungeon, and
was
the five
attacking.
room
I was.
dungeon did nothing to you. Where is that tweet? Anyway, you basically said that the only reason 5 room dungeons were popular was because of rules bloat in 5e and Pathfinder, and dungeon masters didn't want to take the time to build a complete dungeon. Would you care to
Kind
elaborate
of.
on that? Would you?
Actually, that was really just shit posting. But my issue with five room dungeons actually a little bit more nuanced. Um, because when you really dive into it, and there was this guy who's on Twitter. I'm not going to mention his name, but he likes to poke you, and he started poking. Like, why don't you have this guy on your show? And I was like, went to this guy's blog, and it was from like a while back where he talks about the five room dungeon, and it's actually like sort of like an adventure design tool or
Right.
philosophy. I think I sent you the link, or maybe you were reading it or something,
Yeah,
but
I believe this is by the guy who did it. I think what's his name? Something four.
yeah.
I can't remember
I
his
Before
name.
I get into that though, like I don't think what people are referring to as five room dungeons is that. I think it started off as that, and then for your casual player, especially for everybody, playing during the pandemic, five room dungeon was literally just that. Like, oh hey, we got the small little dungeon, we could do it in one session, yay!
Right, right.
And I think, and I do think that the fifth edition turned into, especially with all the bloat and to some extent Pathfinder, just a tabletop battle skirmish simulator. I really don't feel like it's D&D in the classic sense at all. And a five room dungeon would make sense because you would just, like a board game, just kind of go along. And so no, I stand by that statement, but then diving into what this guy was saying about the five room dungeon design and how it can be applied to anywhere, including wilderness crawls,
Hmm.
I really hate it. It's like that scene from Tombstone
Oh shit.
where 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 Doc Holliday goes, Piers Ringo's an educated man. Now I really hate him. So
Yeah, yeah.
I took a look
Okay,
at that. And I'm like, now I really hate this thing.
real quick. We're gonna go over this real quick, but basically, it's for those of you who haven't heard the five room dungeon, and if you're watching this, I don't know how you haven't heard of it. But just in case, the idea is that it's a sort of a one shot, one session dungeon you can put together. But each of the five rooms has a, I guess, a theme or whatever. So here, let's reading from this. Room one is the entrance and guardian. So wherever you're at first, you're going to put something to try to keep the players out. Room two, you're going to have a puzzle or role playing challenge. All right. In room three, there will be a trick or setback. Just something to kind of put your players back on their heels. Room four is the actual climax, the big battle, the big conflict that you're going to have. Room five is your reward, revelation, and plot twist. So, literally, you can go look this up on the internet. You will find dungeon maps, five room dungeon maps, and they're each plotted out kind of this, in this fashion. Um, I see this as a structure. I see it as a guide. Um, I think for, I think it's, and we've talked about this. I've got no problem with role playing games being easy, especially for the newcomer or kids. um, it's just a guide. I think to help. If I were just like had never run a dungeon before and we're kind of looking at how to do this, I would probably like it, especially if I had a bunch of new players. Um, I don't think I would stick with this with just this, and I've never actually used this. It's a framework. Nothing to hate here. What I imagine would make you like this more is if you changed, say, the five room dungeon to the five level dungeon, right? Because at least then, things can get fucking hard, right? They get
Well,
hardcore.
it's not actually that. Because you're right, it's not a dungeon design tool, mechanism, philosophy, theory. It's a story structure. is what it is.
Yes.
It's a
Hmm.
story structure. It is not a dungeon design thing.
But
And
well, but
is one of the things because you might as well here. Let me translate. Okay, so I being the more OSR guy of the two of us,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm going to translate everything you said about the 5-room dungeon. Okay, so in room 1 you have your quantum ogre. In room 2 you have another quantum ogre. In room 3 a third quantum ogre. Room 4 another quantum ogre, and then room 5 is your twist where you get to play critical role.
Okay.
So
Um.
that's my problem when you try to use it as a dungeon design mechanism. Okay, dungeons real. I've been doing so much with mega dungeons recently. I'm by no means an expert, but trying to design my own, and like I just bought Stonehell. It's like an old one from
Right.
like a decade ago. Can't wait to dive into that just to sort of see how that author does it. But you really need the okay. So if I don't want to put this on the spectrum of like story games where there's like a really linear sort of path, and then pure sandbox games, I think mega dungeons are kind of in the middle, right? It's kind of linear in the sense that you have Hamlet, your home base, and then you have the mega
Right.
dungeon, and that's all you're doing, right? So there's not a whole lot of choice there. But once you get inside, that's where the player agency should thrive, as the players have all these different places they can go. So, um, so I don't. It shouldn't be called the 5-room dungeon. It should be called theory. It should be called something else, like the 5-act theory or the 5 beats theory or something.
Yeah, I can see that. I guess what I argue with you about is the hate, and it is hate.
It is.
Um, but it also I don't know why it would bother you to use that as a structure. Like when he says like for you, so when he says and you can use this for wilderness adventures. Well, of course you can.
No,
And
you
you're like
can't.
that makes me hate it more. Of course you can.
No, you can't. But
Yes, you
okay,
can.
I'm okay. Hold on a second. Okay, so I walk into a dungeon. There's a hallway. There's a door. Room 1, right, and then room 2,
Right.
room 3. I step out of my hex where the village is, and I am surrounded by hexes.
Well, if you're if
And
you're
there's
playing, if you're doing like if the only thing you can do in a hex is a overland hours long travel,
yeah,
but there's nothing that says you can't if you want break that down into turn rounds and turns, right? If you needed if there was something going on, I mean that's what happens when an encounter happens, right? So you
right.
could
But
very easily
you're
you could very easily have your people out in the forest and headed towards something and they find a
the
guardian
guardian.
of the guardian of the Fey Woods,
And that just
right?
underscores my argument that this is more about a plot device and plot
Well,
structure.
I what if
Because
well
if you have your guardian of the Fey Forest, right, and it's to the east of Hamlet, but your
right,
players
right.
go west, what? Oh, we're gonna
Then
move
it
the forest over here now. Now it's to the west.
sure,
That's what
yeah.
that
I mean, if you
quantum ogre,
I'm going to
dude.
tell you I'll tell you the truth. If I'm sitting with a blank hex map in front of me, right? And I have encounters, I've got like a dungeon, I'm not sure. We're going to let it drop randomly or however we're going to decide to do it. And at the beginning of the game, my players decide to go west instead of east. Yeah, the dungeon is going to wind up to the west because I need it. It's that's emergent gameplay right there,
No,
right?
no, 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 no,
Like
no, no,
that's
no.
emergent.
No, 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 no,
Well,
no. That
okay,
is
this is
literally the
this is
definition
so
of quantum ogre.
real quick though. Let me ask you this: we had talked when we had Rob on last week, right?
Right. Hmm.
We had talked about how a lot of times dungeons, or I had talked about how sometimes dungeons just don't make sense. It feels a lot like a monster hotel, right?
Hmm.
And the only purpose for them to be there is killing monsters for XP and gold. Okay, which there's nothing wrong with that. Go do it, right? Have fun. But I could see a dungeon master using this, right? Using this technique, his players being satisfied, and all he's doing is using these 5 rooms, these 5 sort of story ish, whatever, however you want to call it, the structure to lay out like a grander plan or give it a little bit of a backdrop, right? It doesn't have to be fucking Critical Role where everybody's making voices, but to completely take any kind of story out, I mean, the characters have to have a purpose, right? So we're giving, and we'll talk about this later in our second subject. This kind of gives the players purpose, right? As you move through, there's a reason to keep moving through. And it may be narrative, but who cares? You know, look, and I would never say I think this is like everybody should use this to, plan their done. Fuck, no, don't do that. But if you're planning a one shot, if you only have like 2.5 to 3 hours to play, if you're playing with new players, if you're playing with kids, if you're doing anything that is not going to take, I mean, you guys have been stuck in the Temple of Elemental Evil for 2 years. Us mere mortals down here are not going to do the same dungeon for we're not that hardcore or cool, most of us. We're going to get fucking bored of the same fucking dungeon. We are not. We're that's not. I'm older than you, I think, right?
I think so.
And
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
and I think there's very few people, period. The people that are going to do that, they're not. In fact, it's not even. I don't even think it's a taste. I think it's an ethos, right? They're not. I generally believe. Here come the flames, man. I
Okay.
generally believe that over half of the OSR guys don't do it for taste. They're doing it to spit in 5e's eye,
Oh, I
or for
disagree.
some
No,
kind of
I could. I could.
like I'm hardcore thing. There are
Nope.
so many guys I've met
I
who, when you
disagree. I
start
just.
talking, there are so many guys I've met that when you start talking to them about anything, anything past BX or AD, the furthest would be like AD&D second edition, right? Or second edition D&D, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, there is no making sense out of certain conversations. It no longer becomes two people exchanging facts and going back and forth and talking. It becomes an ideological discussion almost every time.
Talk like with the OSR. Like I will
Yeah, with the OSR in
concede.
general,
I
and I
will
and I
totally
fucking
concede
love
that.
OSC. But what I'm
No, I
saying
know.
is
I
that
don't
I would
understand,
say
but okay.
50% of the players are doing it out of ethos and not necessarily because it's better
Well, I'm going
or
to add
even their
some
general
nuance.
taste.
I gotta add some nuance to this. I gotta add some nuance to
Go
this.
for it.
Um, there is definitely a philosophy behind the OSR, and there's definitely sort of like a broad tribalism to the OSR. There's like a pride there, especially when you have people who follow way more popular YouTubers than us, like RPG Pundit or Venture Satanis or
Right,
Grim
right.
Jim, or but I don't think that there is I don't think it's inauthentic. I think there really is a desire to capture that sword and sorcery feel that the origins of the game really were. When I talk to the old grognards, they have like a hate. I should hate might be too strong of a word, but for
I'll
second
use the word
edition
hate. I'll use the word hate.
because because second edition was the turning point. That's when you had that Hickman revolution. But I grew up on second edition, right?
Right.
And and I don't have that level of hate. I do think it's a poor game, but that's not necessarily because of the philosophy. I just think it's poorly designed. Like I'd rather play Beckme, right? I'd rather play BX. I'm in that sort of branch of the game
Right, right.
of the but I know I disagree. I think there is an authenticity there. There's a real desire. There's a guy I had a conversation with on Max Liao's stream some months ago. Mage's Musings, and he was telling, he's like, yeah, I used to be
I
a
love his videos. I bought those little
yeah.
paper miniatures. I love his
Oh, you did?
videos.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
He's a
yeah,
great
yeah,
guy.
yeah.
Like, but he was telling me, he's like, yeah, I used to be a story gamer. I used to have that sort of philosophy, but then once I sort of embrace that sort of old school mentality and really try to understand it, I just think it's a superior form of play. And then I would also, as exhibit B to my argument, you have young people like millennials who obviously didn't grow up where when we grew up and certainly aren't grognards embracing
Millennials
the
have kids
OS.
now, by the way. Wait,
Yeah,
you know millennials have kids. All right, cool.
yeah, no, I know.
Okay.
But but even they are like embracing like that OSR mentality and vehemently, pound the payment on it.
Yeah.
So, and I think I don't want to like trash millennials. That's not my intent. I think some of them it is more ethos for them, but for a lot of like the grognards and the Gen Xers that I played with, I've been talking to, I think it's a very authentic love for that style of play, and it really comes down to player agency and that sort
Right.
of like I'm going to determine my character's fate, not some 5 act,
Word.
string me
I hear
along,
you.
you know.
I hear you with that. Um, I would say there's a difference, right? So there is the, and we're not. We need to reel this back in because we're kind of going off on a tangent here. But when I say there's like 50% of the people where it's more of an ethos than it's their taste, it's kind of like if all you play is OSR, right? It's kind of like saying you collect comic books, but you only buy Batman, right? I used to work at a comic book store years and years ago, and we'd have these dudes come in and they didn't collect comics, which is fine. They collected Batman, and anything that said Batman on the cover, they bought. And it
Right.
it, it wasn't really about taste because they never tried anything else, right? There could be shit that they would love better than that. Lots of good indie shit, right? But they're not. That's not what they're there for, right? They're there for Batman, for this sort of I'm this kind of fan. And I don't think it's all, and maybe that's a high number. Maybe 50% is high, but I do get that because having talked to people, so there's two. One, there is an attitude, and it is like anytime you try to talk about anything having to do with your character, even if you're 5 or 6 levels in and it's a simple question, you're just looking for like some kind of like not even a story, just like a motivation or a hook, something to kind of pull the players along. It's like, oh, you know, like, hey, what part of the world do you think your character grew up in? You know, these are the same people that show up to your OSE game and they've already rolled up 3 characters, right? Um, anyway, I don't know. I just think that it is the 5 room dungeon. Getting back to what we were going to talk about, I don't see anything wrong with the 5 room dungeon. It's not the be all end all. It is a framework, and it's a framework that gives context to why the players would be doing things other than just golden experience. It doesn't have to be deep. I mean, I was rereading one of the Dungeon Crawl Classic modules the other day, and it's just a line. This room was used for this. You know what I mean? This was this. This was that. That you gotta bargain with a troll to cross a bridge or some shit. It's the same thing we've always been doing. There's just a structure to it. Um, yeah, I'm not against the framework. I don't I don't think you should use it all the time. And here's another question. Let's say I did use it all the fucking time, right? How many of my players do you think would know?
I think you'd be surprised.
Nah.
I think you'd be surprised. And here's the reason because I generally don't. I'm as much as I like to talk shit, like I'm like the bloodthirsty game master mudcore. I mean, I am kind of, but I do actually care about my players, and I do think my players are generally intelligent. I think that if I'm like trying to pull the wool over their eyes, like through fudging dice rolls or something, they'll figure it out.
Right.
So I think they would, especially if because you've watched plenty of television where you're just like, yeah, the
Sure,
first
sure,
season
sure.
was great, but then all of a sudden the show got formulaic. That'll happen. I'm certain that will happen.
Absolutely. You know what? You are right about that. I do think that if you used it for every encounter or for every session, for every dungeon, for every I do, yes, some people are going to begin to catch on. But that kind of leads us into our next subject, right? So let's agree
Does it?
before we yeah, it
I
does. It
I, I
does.
agree to nothing.
Okay. Well, how about this? I think well, okay, so here's the question. Do you think that it's just utter trash and should be ignored and nobody should ever look at the write up for 5 room dungeons?
Oh, I would never be that Boko Haram about something. No, I'm not going to be that hard line. I don't like it, and I've explained why. I think it's too quantum ogre if you're going to actually do dungeons that way. If you had some sort of overarching grand plot for a campaign, I would not hold it against you if you used it, but I would expect that, let's say, room number one to take a couple of sessions, like maybe a month or
Fuck
something.
no.
I
God.
would
Oh my
imagine. So
God,
that way,
dude.
and then you have your
Oh,
denouement. We're like, oh yay, we found the bad guy, and now
a
here's the
month.
and then
You're like that trailer park girl whose boyfriend beats her up and she fucking calls the cops. And when the cops get there, she's like, but I love him. Don't take him to jail. You know what I mean? That is fucking a month for what?
I'm not gonna do that. I mean, for a one shot, like you said, like for a one shot, it's perfect for a one shot
Right.
or convention game. But I hear people use that a lot, like, oh, this is perfect for a convention game, like it's some great argument in support of a philosophy, a game, or whatever. I'm like, the vast majority of players are not playing convention games. They want a game that they can continue to play
Right.
every week, every other week, whatever, with their friends. So they have like this great experience. So the convention game, the perfect for a one shot, is sort of like, to me, like a throwaway compliment. It's just like, and if you hear me say that, like, oh yeah, I kind of like it. It's just good for a one shot. That's me saying it's okay. I just don't want to say anything bad
Yeah,
about it.
for real. But I will say this though. I mean, there are situations like that, right? I think the 5 room dungeon is great for a one shot. I think it'd be great for convention play, even though I'm not a big convention guy. I also think it would be a great level one starting adventure, like a temple ruins or something like that. I think there's a place for it. I think one of the reasons people react so strongly to it is because when this first hit the scene, people were just like 5 room dungeon, 5 room dungeon. It's the new way to do it. Somebody perfected it. You know what I mean? And just like everything in gaming or in life in general, it had a lot of hype. And I think the early adherents to it probably were not your OSR Broheims. You know what I mean? So I think it has a lot of baggage, and I don't think people really look at it fairly. If you don't have a place to use it in your game, whatever, that's fine. And like I say, I don't think I've ever used it, but I don't think it's without merit. And I definitely now I will give your post one thing I did agree with, and that is that Pathfinder in 5e, it would be a pain in the ass. Not really, not the way I make dungeons though. The way I make dungeons, like, oh, there's a monster in this room, and then you put the page number of the monster manual where it is on the map.
Yeah, yeah. I'm having this conversation with someone who's just not into dungeons. Yeah.
Well, hold on. I've played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, right? As much as I've played other games, I've played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, and there's been a lot of dungeon delves, and it's fine. But when I'm dungeon delving, and even sometimes depending on like the hex crawl, not every hex crawl, but some of them, it can very much feel like you were made a complaint about it a second ago. It can very much feel to me like just playing Hero Quest or another board game, right? Like you're just in this dungeon. Here's the corner. There's the bad guys. Here's the You know what I mean? It has that very mechanical going through the motions of things. And honestly, for a role playing game that's set in a fantasy world where everything's supposed to be mysterious and magical and everything else, if you don't at least have like a 2 or 3 sentence, like write up about why the characters are there, are they looking for anything special or whatever. I just really, it's not that I don't like it, but to me that's brainless. It's not role playing. It's
well,
what people did. It's that one step away from wargaming. It's the
well,
individual
that's the
tactical
origin.
battle.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, you're right. You're right, and that's the origin of the game. Like, role playing wasn't what we do, what we understand
absolutely.
it now. It was, I'm playing the fighter in this party. That's the role I'm playing. It's
Right,
not, I'm Ragnar who has this tragic past, and he's just trying to avenge his mom who was butchered by orcs, or not orcs, because we want to be nice to orcs now, but you know what I'm trying to say.
right, right,
Um,
right.
so I would definitely agree with you there. But I go back to Conan the Barbarian. That was a fun movie, and they had this awesome heist, and that was the whole purpose, was to get the treasure, and it was a great adventure that they had, and they of course blew it all at the tavern or whatever. But I think I think a, a dungeon doesn't have to be a board game, and this is one of the reasons why I'm actually going to be pretty critical of Temple of Elemental Evil when I'm ready to start making a video on it, because I just don't think. I mean, granted, this was in the game was still in its infancy,
Right.
right? They were still learning things. There's definitely factions there, but there's needs to be something more there to entice players to want to keep going in, so they're not bored, like you said. But like if I was in a campaign where every dungeon delve was like this 5 room dungeon concept, I'd be bored because I'd
Absolutely.
catch the formula like immediately, and like I because there was some heat from my tweet, and someone said something like kind of like what you said, like, oh, I just can't stand no one today wants to go into a dungeon and delve for hours or whatever. And I just
Well, definitely not a
responded,
month. Definitely.
I responded, I do, because I like that shit. If it's a good mega dungeon where there's a mystery, like what is this place? How do I unlock this
Okay.
door? How do
And
I do
and but
this other
okay,
thing?
that's fine. But right there, that's what I'm talking about. You just said you didn't want that. You compared that
I
to
didn't
story
say
game.
I
Wait,
didn't
hang
I
on,
didn't
hold
say
on,
no
because
no
you
no
could
no no no
use.
no no.
Whoa,
I
let me
still
finish.
I
Let
still
me. I have the floor, sir. Look, I said
He's gonna
earlier
start
that
calling me Yankee any minute now. Okay.
I know you damn Yankee. Uh, maybe after my next Irish coffee. Um, I actually, I had said earlier that you could use the 5 room dungeon and it doesn't have to be role playing. It could be 1 to 3 sentences, just something that kind of gives the players a clue and kind of pushes them along. And that seems to me to be exactly what you're saying right now, right? The 5 room dungeon, if you can make it more than 5 rooms or whatever, but this structure, I feel like if you're somebody who really doesn't understand structure, stories, or what have you, like I don't see why this couldn't be used to make what you're saying right now. Nothing's going on. Why you couldn't use a structure like this, even if it was per floor or per level or what have you, to give a little bit more, right? Like you're saying it's just a dungeon.
Um, I just got chubby
Yeah, you
funster.
were
I
not
had a
paying attention to me, dude. You were listening to
I
old chubby funster.
no, I was listening. I was listening.
Thanks,
Uh,
chubby. I made a good point there.
no, I was actually thinking, because I think you're kind of stretching what the 5 room dungeon is actually trying to say, and to include
Absolutely.
other things.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to keep a narrow definition. And I'm like, I have no problem with the campaign, the mega dungeon campaign starting off with, and this is actually the mega dungeon I'm working on. There's this barony. It's a piece of crap barony. It's just sort of there. No one pays any attention to it. But then there's this weird earthquake and there's a landslide and something gets revealed. And now all these adventurers want to go check it out. That's sort of like the mode, like what's in there. And then they know there's monsters coming out of it, right? So thanks, Chummy. I was getting berated. No, I'm just kidding.
I saw
Um,
that.
um, but like, so I got nothing wrong with this story. But like I said, once you step into that mega dungeon, that's where the
Right.
player agency takes over, and they can go left, they can go right. And if it's a well designed mega dungeon where there's all these loops and certain, they call it jaquazing the dungeon or
Yeah,
whatever,
yeah, yeah.
like
Yeah.
there's stuff to do in there. And that's, to me, a good mega dungeon is not just like, so it doesn't feel like a board game, like Temple of Elemental Evil is starting to feel like to me,
Right, right.
you know?
Yeah. I look, I for the most part I agree with you, Matt. And I get what you're saying. And I would get bored if everything was a 5 room dungeon. For sure. Um and I don't really want to be the biggest defender of this, but I do think that I don't think it's garbage. I think it can have a lot of use, especially at the beginning of a campaign, and especially with new play, and especially with the new DM.
I can
You
concede
know,
that point.
you
I
know
will
what I mean.
concede that point.
It's it, it's just a spice. You know what I mean. You're not going to use the same spice for every dish, and hopefully, let's say somebody had just started playing. Right, like that ever happens. Brand new dungeon master, brand new group of people playing a game. I think eventually, like this would be a great place to start. And if they actually like the game and they keep investing time and thought, into it, they would move past it themselves, right? Or they're going to seek out other things and not know. But one of the things that this does is, and we're going to move on. One of the things that this does that I think the 5 room dungeon does is it gives, you're talking about player agency and consequences, right?
Yeah.
It can, and Professor DM put out a video this week, and it was actually, there was another channel that did it, a young lady, um, Stephanie Plays Games, where they referred to a video, an older video. I think it's about a 10 or 12-year-old video with Matt Parker and Trey Stone talking about stories. Don't gag. Um, because they are talking about stories. And I think we were talked about playing that video. I think it's like 2 minutes.
Yeah, I got it. I got it. Just give me a second to
So
share the
yeah,
screen here. Well,
real
you
quick.
finished what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. You work with that. So basically, it can be summed up really quick. But what it comes down to is it's a technique for making sure you're not just adding event on top of event on top of event, or random room on top of random room. In my the way I'm thinking about it. I think they call it because and so. And I've heard it referred to as other things, but we can. Are you ready? You have that
Yep.
video going? All right,
Yep.
let's watch the video.
See, this gets popped up accordingly. Hold on a second. There. That way you see us, and then I will press play.
Can't hear it, bro. Matt, I can't hear it. Can you hear it?
Oh, you can't. You're not getting it.
I'm getting like a little bitty mumble or something.
Oh, really? Oh, that's not.
Yep.
Oh, that's too bad. Oh, because it's got. Let's see. Hmm. Let's see here. I wonder if I can. Give me a second here.
Sure thing.
Oh yeah, because it's just sharing that. It's not actually broadcasting it. Here, let me stop sharing. Let me try something else. Let's try this. Can you hear it now?
Nope.
No.
Nope.
Oh
That's
wow.
all right.
Oh,
We can
that's a
work this
bummer.
out. Yeah, we can work this out. Um, Basically, what they're saying is that in between each scene, say a scene ends, right? For in role playing terms, I would say encounter ends, right? And between that and the next scene, there needs to be a because or a so. The players defeated this encounter, so or therefore this thing happens. The players failed in the encounter, but something uh, something happens. And basically the rule is if in between scenes, as a writer, you would be saying and then, because and then has no relation to what's going on. You know what I mean?
Right. Well,
It's
they're
just something happening. but everything that you do, and I know, when you're writing a script, every scene has conflict, which means there is a winner or a loser to some extent. You win, but you lose, you know, therefore.
Therefore, yeah, no, that's essentially what they were talking about. Because if you just say, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, you're just piling on stuff, and um, that's where you get this sort of well, 5 room dungeon. This happens, and then this happens, and then
Ah,
this happens, and then this happens. Whereas if you have a properly designed mega dungeon, you can
right,
go in
right,
there, and then something happens, and then there's a consequence. There,
right.
the therefore or but kind of thing. And for those who are more story game type players, and this is a safe space. I pick on Gary a lot, but I got nothing against the story game. You know,
Oh man. Oh
uh,
man.
but but
Chubby, is
I
this
think
better? Sorry, go ahead, Matt.
I think I think one of the problems a lot of story gamer types fall into is that they have this, and then this, and then this, and then this, because they get stuck into this idea that I have to have a beginning, middle, and end. Where I sort of feel like you should maybe embrace a more emergent story thing, where it's just sort of like, yeah, you have these NPCs, these villains who have their own motivations, and they're going to do these things, but you should
Yeah,
be reacting
yeah,
to
yeah.
your players. Their players shouldn't just be waiting to get prompted for the next scene.
For sure. So you know what? I definitely Fate's a fun system. Uh yes. So what they're talking about is really, if you were writing a screenplay or a story, what they're really talking about is act two, right? And that's where it's sort of like in the movies, like all the cool stuff from the trailer for your favorite movies, right? That all happens in act two, right? It's all the chases. The characters are pretty much in charge of the bulk of that movie, right? Typically over half of the movie or half of the story. Um, excuse me. And the way that I've seen it explained in storytelling books and books about screenplays or anything is that the way it would happen in a movie. I'm not saying you should do this in your game, but it's kind of the same thing. Is that, like we said before, there's gonna at the beginning of your game, you kind of have this normal life, and then something happens which causes the characters to venture off into an adventure. In regular D&D, obviously, this is just we're poor and we don't want to be mud farmers. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. Uh, but then Act Two really is the players. Something happened. They're going to do something about it. When they go to do something about it, they're going to win or lose. But right, and one of the ways you can think about that is um like think of a movie like Mean Girls, right? Where by not even the middle of the movie, the dorky girl is turned into the hot girl, right? She's a mean girl now. So she wins. She's the popular girl, but she loses all her really good friends. You know what I
Right.
mean? Or you win the battle, but Professor Xavier took a bullet in the back. It's that kind of thing. And that works in submersion, and the way that I would use that, or the way that I see it used most, is from encounter. If you're playing a game where you're only designing each encounter, like before the session, you don't have a lot of planning, kind of like Hankerin talks about with ICRPG. Then every because he said he's been saying for like 10 years, don't plan ahead of the next encounter, right? But plan for that encounter that night, and then based on the results of what happens, that's going to determine what the next encounter is. And that's it. That's really all it comes down to. And is there a published dungeon or adventure that does that well, or is that something that has to be done? You know what I mean? Like, is that something you could pull off in a published adventure, or do you think that's something that's in a more organic, sandboxy, no story? game at all. What?
Well, I can give you the OSR answer to that.
Please do give me the OSR answer to that, Matt.
The OSR,
I'd love to hear you speak for the OSR.
the
Everybody,
OSR.
the OSR is speaking.
All right, tables. Lots and lots of tables and
Right.
being able to think on the fly. Like a guy named Dunder Moose said this thing because he was talking about the Bro SR philosophy about a year ago on a video. And the Bro SR are all about the appendix N. So that's all they do
Right.
is like and everything that comes from the appendix N. So he encourages you to read the appendix N. And it's this thing that kind of floats in the back of your brain. And so when something unexpected happens or you get this weird random result, you know what to do because you've read Poul Anderson, you've read Edgar Rice Burroughs, you've read all these guys. So like when they're your characters are traveling in the desert and you roll Martians, it's like, oh, this is like, Barsoom, we're going to have John Carter's adventure now. I tell people to have their own appendix N when they're dealing with their own campaign. What is going on and this is why I like to do all this upfront prep work for a campaign. So I have my appendix N ready to go. So when my players are like, yes, we're going to go to the mega dungeon. And I'm like, sweet. And then the very next session, they're like, we actually don't want to do the mega dungeon today. We're going to go do some hex crawling. Okay. And then I just have my procedures and you just
Right.
start making rolls. I think that's how you do it. You don't need, and I guess this is where I kind of agree with some of the bros on this. You really don't need published adventures if you're
Right.
really good at running things on the fly. I like that being said, though, like me as a connoisseur, I like the
Right.
comic
Right.
book analogy you use. I like using published adventures, especially when um, it's been a long week and I just haven't had time to really think about anything and I'm tired. And it's just like, you know what? This is a good one. I'm just going to run this today. You know what I mean? Or at least put it on the map if people want to go and investigate the Tower of the Stargazer, for example. But broadly speaking, yeah, all you need is a good rule book with some good tables in it. Like Shadow Dark's got some decent tables. I love their tables. AD&D First Edition is the gold standard. You know,
Yeah.
back me. You know,
No, I hear you. Think. Okay. So let me ask you. In the old, like my favorite Beckme, um, accessories or game aids, or I liked them as Star campaign books. Right. I love those.
those
Really.
gazetteers.
Yeah, the Gazetteers. Excuse me. Yeah, I should know that. I own a lot of them, but not all of them. Um, and there's probably more lore in that than there is mechanics. I mean, you get the map, right? It kind of lays out the
Yep.
geography and the creatures that live there, but there's a lot of lore. What is that for? If you're not now, don't get me wrong. I don't think in an OSR game you should have role playing where like if you want to do the whole thing where people are in voices or whatever, have a go at it. But really, OSR is one of those games where I would completely allow a player to walk up and say, "Hey, I'm trying to bargain with this guy, words, words, words," and then roll the dice. I would have no problem at all.
Right. Yeah.
But those books are filled with lore and they're filled with NPCs and NPC motivations. If you read into it, there's all kinds of ideas you can get for adventures just based on NPCs. So what are you supposed to do with that lore? Like if you're just hex crawling and you're running into dungeons, right? What are we buying that for?
To write a 5-room dungeon. No. No. Well, if you're really like hardcore into Mystara, like some guy like Mr. Welch, he's got a cool channel.
He's got a great
Um,
channel. Yeah.
yeah. You can that can be your appendix N. So when something happens, you're traveling through the Grand Duchy of Karmikos and you run into not bandits, but armed guards. And you're like, oh, what are they doing so far out from like the main main capital there. Oh, they're about 3 hexes away from the Black Eagle Barony. You know what? These armed guards are from the Black Eagle Barony. This is the bad guy. This is going to be a cool encounter. You know what I mean? It's just something you do
Right.
off the fly. So, but because I know where you're going with this, it's also lore for you to develop your grand plots. I don't have a problem with, you know, like when I designed the Lamentations of Elemental Evil campaign, it was originally just going to be a mega dungeon crawl, but then I'm like, oh, I want to use all these other modules, this, that, and the other thing. So I turned it into a sandbox, and then to sort of make it make sense, I took a recommendation from Vedra Satanis of all people, who said pick 3 things that are going to be like the theme to your campaign. So it was mushrooms, uh, temple is the source of all evil, and what was the other one? Oh, dark and gritty dark fantasy, right? And so that those themes colored the campaign. That made me feel like I had a story, kinda,
Right. Right.
without actually directing the players to do anything. And what was great was this organic thing happened where that first group of players in my campaign had a long-standing hatred for the 2 guys at the trading post in Hamlet, because those guys are cultists and they're spies, and my players figured it out, but they couldn't prove it. So it was hilarious, but it became like this part of the game, this emergent story. So I'm not opposed to stuff like that. I just, like I said, I don't want, and then this happens, and then this happens, and this,
Right.
and you know.
Right. 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 Um, I I don't know if I agree that that's the way the 5 room dungeon is that bad about that. Especially if there's a theme for it, right? Like if it fits in something. And guys, don't get too upset when I'm talking about story. Um, and if we're talking about an OSR style game, I'm not talking about stories and you guys need to sit and role play out some big thing. What I'm just talking about is why just a basic premise. You know what I mean? Every game has that. Um, just we got to go find this before the bad shit happens. That's all you need. And in between there, even when you've got to interact with other characters. And here's another goddamn thing. I'm gonna stop apologizing for role playing. What the fuck is your charisma score for? Right? Like each one of your stats represents a mechanical, your strength in this area or that area. Story is the thing that's why people have to talk, you know. So like definitely you don't have to do the big role playing thing and the OSR things, but it's not like it's not there for a reason, right? Like you got to fucking use it. So
No,
that does imply a little bit of story, a little bit of role playing, and you can take that to wherever you want or you're comfortable in your game. But the idea that a dungeon is somehow more emergent or offers, because one, it's a fucking bottle episode, right? Your characters are trapped in that fucking dungeon. Oh, they get to go left or right. What a fucking choice, dude. Okay, great. So you're gonna have the
no,
10th spike trap this way and the fucking goblins that way. Whatever the fuck, dude. Okay, great. They're really in charge of some shit. You know what I mean? They're not in charge of anything. They're trapped. They're trapped. They're not. The only choice they had, the only real choice that the players had was whether to go into the dungeon or not. Are we going to just make it through this hex or are we going to go through this? Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but the idea that emergent gameplay somehow is at best in a mega dungeon, it can be good, maybe it can be great, but you're stuck, dude. You're not playing an MMO. You're
I
playing
I
a
agree
role
with you.
playing game with big fucking rails, even if you can't see them. Right? It's not Red
I
Dead. It's fucking Assassin's Creed or something.
I
Go ahead.
uh Assassin's Creed Black Flag was awesome. Anyway, I really just like this sea shanties, really. But
Okay, let me make it better. It's the difference between Gauntlet and an
Gauntlet's
MMO,
badass.
right? I love Gauntlet. I love Gauntlet. Right? There's nothing wrong with it, but if that's
Well, I
all you're
would concede
doing,
that I concede that, the mega dungeon is sort of like this railroad-ish. That's why I say, like, on this continuum, it's kind of in the middle. Like, this campaign's about this mega dungeon. This is the only place you're gonna go, right? But if it's a good, well-designed mega dungeon, you're gonna bump into factions, and there's gonna be that role playing. Like, oh, are we gonna fight the orcs, or are we gonna try to befriend them? You know, um, that sort of thing. And then you befriend the orcs, and maybe you learn some more information, this, that, and the other thing. So, but yeah,
well, and even if you don't role play that scene out, it has a mechanical hitch to it, right? If you do well with those orcs, and I don't know why you would talk to orcs. Orcs deserve fucking death. Um, if I'm ever playing D&D, what is it, 24, and there's an orc character, I swear to God, I'm going to cut him down as a paladin and rule that it was justified.
it
Bitches.
was justified.
Oh, God. Um. Anyway, yeah, I just think that it's silly. Like I say, and this is really something that I've encountered. Probably about, what was it, 2 or 3 years ago, um right before I stopped traveling for work. Um, I started running a lot of OSE, right? And I didn't throw a lot of story. You know what I mean? I think we were doing in fact, the only thing that even resembled a story is we were doing Keep on the Borderlands. And, I made my own NPCs, right?
Sure.
And they had their own little thing, and that was it. And the characters interacted or didn't interact with them however they wanted. But I noticed that when I went from that to I started running an Everyday Heroes campaign, which is very 5e, by the way. Like, if you don't
Right.
like 5e, Brian would probably argue with me, but if you don't like 5e, I don't think you're going to like this. And I'm not playing it anymore. but, but the thing is that, that did demand a little bit of story. And the players I had come over from OSC, it was grumble, 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 grumble. You know what I mean? And I was like, you knew what this game was, right?
Right.
Like, you knew. And because it's 5e, we've got maps, we were playing online, but we had maps, we had and this and that. Um, the group I wound up playing an actual short campaign with using Everyday Heroes, like, that was a great group. They all knew what was up. They were, you know what I mean? They had a lot, but that first couple playthroughs with some OSE guys, it was like pulling hair, man. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I do think that there is a general, like, consensus that you're supposed to not have any kind. You know what I mean? Like, you're just supposed to put it on the board and hero quest it. And I
Yeah.
think the closer
Yeah.
you get to hero quest, the happier some players are, just flat out.
Well, I could tell you, like, with the experience of, like, my in-person gaming crew, I am begging. Like, half the time I'm begging. Like, I want to react to you, but they just sit
Right.
there and wait for me. They're used to, and then this happens, and then this happens, and this happens. So,
Yep. And
but
I think I think that is, and we've talked about this. I need to take a break in about 2 minutes. We've
yeah,
talked about this, but I actually think that one of the issues, one of the things it's been a while since I, like, really struggled with a game, and I do feel like, and I don't want to say I'm not having a good time, because I'm having a great time, but one of the things I'm struggling with in our campaign is the fact that I think I got used to a certain kind of player who, like, every word I said was important.
hmm
You know what I mean? And because they were used to playing a certain kind of game, right? And I think now I think heroic leans to the narrative. I mean, it
oh,
can be
totally
mechanical.
does.
It can be as mechanical as you want, but it does. I mean, it's got social interaction rules, right?
Yeah,
So
it totally is.
we're playing a narrative game, and I think the majority of the guys we're playing with, I don't know if they're OSR brutes or anything like that, but I think they are. I think they're, everybody at this age is typically more of a D&D player, right? More of a map.
hmm
That's just the way it is. And so I think what I'm struggling with now is I went from a group of players who hung on every word, right? And they would hear that clue that I dropped that I wanted them to figure out. And they were used to just be like, yeah, we're going. This is what we are going to do now. My character is getting in their car. But this is, and I think I haven't adjusted to You know what I mean? I haven't adjusted
Yeah,
to my, this
I
new group of players.
no, I definitely I could tell you, yeah, a lot of I don't want to drop names or anything like that, but a lot of us are like looking at the rules and trying to, and not necessarily like maximize or optimize or anything, but we're looking at the rules and the mechanics and
Right.
the procedures, and that's what we're kind of there for, or in part, you know what I mean? So um it's been it's been an interesting what I've been liking about it though is because like you are a different style of game master, so it's like
Right.
it's kind of refreshing because I've been doing nothing but with other guys like OSR style games.
Well,
So
you've been trapped in the Temple of Elemental Evil for a couple of years,
I haven't been
like
trapped.
I don't
They've
mean,
been
you
all
know what
over
I
the
mean. I mean
place.
trapped in the, actually I mean exactly what you thought. It's just so huge. Hey, I need to take a little bio break. I don't know what you got going on. I'm gonna
I'm gonna chat with some of these people in the while you go do your
gotcha.
thing.
Gotcha. All right.
All right, let's see here. All right, Chubby Funster. The lore is there for the players to act on. If they learn something, they have to pick up the mantle and pursue it. I actually 100% agree with you on this. This is kind of what makes game mastering fun for me. Like, I said earlier, I came from the second edition days, so like I was like doing like story arcs and like these adventure paths. My longest running campaign ever was a 10-year long game, which was like an epic quest. It died because of attrition. We just got too old and we were off to college and we moved away and stuff. But that was a story game, and uh, uh, jumping into the OSR was somewhat of a paradigm shift for me because one, I was like, oh, I remember playing like this way, way back in the day, but I still had that second edition sort of like story desire, right? Like I want to have something there besides there's just this dungeon, let's go get gold. So I think the lore that you put into your own worlds or the lore that you adopt from a pre-existing world, I think is important to draw from and to drop hints. And if the players want to take it, awesome. If not, I think a game master has to be very honest with themselves. Like, how far are you willing to take it? So, like, if you have a big bad that's going to take over the world or whatever, and the player's like, nope, we're just going to dungeon delve and get gold. Well, then I guess this is what's going to happen in your game, unless you decide to just let it go. Of course, you might run into some issues with that in terms of like the whole immersion, verisimilitude, and uh, quantum ogre type things. I know Max Liao likes using timelines. I'm not that hardcore about it, but yeah, I definitely agree with that. And then let's see what we got here. Does group respond when you drop rumors and hints? This has been the bane of my existence. So, and to kind of answer that question, I'm going to talk a little bit about my motivation for wanting to do my own mega dungeon. And for the record, I don't even know if this is going to be a good mega dungeon. This is the first time I've really tried anything like this. Um, Inspired by Shadow Dark, but and sort of my experience with Temple of Elemental Evil. Um, I want, like, if I were to play a mega dungeon, I want to be filled with wonder. Like, what is this place? To me, the mega dungeon's about exploration. Everyone talks about the faction play. Everyone talks about interesting traps, and everyone talks about the design of the map. The Jaquazine, the dungeon, and that sort of thing. But I rarely hear anybody really talk about why that mega dungeon's there. And this goes into the story stuff and the lore. I wanted to basically create the hardest mega dungeon possible, not because of the the traps, not because of the faction play or the monsters or like the maze like nature of it. I want to make it hard because if you're not paying attention to room descriptions and what the game master is telling you, you're going to get lost. You're going to get stuck. You're going to fall into a trap. You're going to, get eaten by this thing that you could have known was there, that sort of thing. I want to bring text boxes back, essentially. So the long story short, this mega dungeon is more out of revenge for my players who don't pick up on my rumors and hints because they never do. They almost never do. So, and
My
I
entire
you
game
know,
right now is rumors and hints. Nobody gets it.
yeah, I know. Like I don't. There's like this rule of thumb. Zach S has talked about it. Drop the rumor 3 times or the hint 3 times. And just and from in my profession, in my real world profession, we actually talk about saying something 3 times in like a closing argument because the jury will pick up on it. Um, so I think there is something about that magic number 3. So I've certainly trying to incorporate that more, you know. But like at the same time, I'm also trying to lean into consequences, and this has gotten some hard feelings from players where someone doesn't pick up on something. I've tried to drop numerous hints, and then they die, and they're like, "What the heck?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know what to tell you, dude.
Hey, Matt, I'm curious. We're talking about the because and so, right? Never the and then. You always want the because and so.
Yeah.
No, I don't think anyone needs to explain how that works in a story or in the story aspect of, say, a game, right? But because and so, how does that work in a dungeon? Because this happened, so this thing because I can think of a few instances like I can never remember the name of it, but that first DCC thing where there's like a pool, and because you do this in the bottom level, the pool may or may not be empty. But really and truly, the because and so thing that I have been trying to work out, my entire. Sorry, my dog is chasing his tail, and he's like an 80-pound German Shepherd in my living room. I apologize. Um, and my Chihuahua is like nipping at
My
his foot.
dog is my dog is snoring behind me. I don't know if everybody can hear it,
Okay,
but
I
she's
can't.
loud.
I can't.
Okay.
So, but I mean, how does that work in the dungeon, right?
I think the dungeon's an environment. So I think that's it works more like on an environmental scale. Like obviously the obvious answer is, well, you've befriended this group of goblins, therefore they're going to expect things from you. So like, oh hey, maybe you befriended the goblins because you're under equipped and you're not very powerful. And the goblins know this. So every time you move through this area of the dungeon, they're going to ask for some of the treasure that you've gotten. Right. So now you have like this issue going on. If it's a cleared room, let's say you clear a room, what happens next in that room? You know, is something going to move in? Is the group going to turn it into a base camp? Which has happened in the Temple of Elemental Evil in my game. They've
Yep.
they started putting up barricades and stuff. It was kind of interesting. But anyway, I think that how do I want to put this? I think that's sort of how it would work. I know it's not like very sophisticated because when you think about the therefore but that's more like the consequences
It's definitely
and
more
more of a
story.
story thing. But I think it still works in a dungeon because you're looking at like, well, what are these creatures? Even if they didn't work out a deal with the goblins, maybe they routed them, but there's some of the goblins survived. What are they going to do? I've been
Right.
thinking about that with the Temple of Elemental Evil because there was the Earth. The Earth Temple was one of the first ones they encountered. Romag, the leader of the Earth Temple, escaped, and I'm like, well, sifting through the book, he had a rough allegiance with the Fire Temple. So there was a fight at one point where they got into the Fire Temple, like outskirts of where the guards were, and all of a sudden Romag shows up and starts supporting the guards, and they're like, "Holy crap!" They had to
Hmm.
retreat. Things like that. But you know, um,
Yeah.
but that's just like the faction play stuff.
Right. I really think the best place where that is shown off the uh the because or so is actually would actually be in between sessions, like in between the encounter, right? Like you finish the encounter, and then because you lost, this happens, or what have you. I don't know. I don't see a lot of use for it in the dungeon, and I don't see a lot of use for it I mean, I can see it being environmental and god damn it. Um yeah, I just think it's much easier to apply in a social in a social encounter, social consequences, that
Oh
kind of thing.
yeah, no, I agree. That's like that's yeah, that absolutely 100%. In fact, you probably should, as a rule of thumb, whenever you have an important encounter, social encounter, have that process. Like, what does this mean? You know,
Right.
I mean, I'm not talking about, oh, I'm going to try to bargain with the merchant. Though that could be if you are doing some sort of asinine, I'm going to bully the merchant into giving me a discount, that will have consequences, right? But even if
Right.
you're like, I've been playing Kingdom Come, the first one, and I always haggle with the merchants, and it's interesting. Like if you actually give them a good deal, like you don't try to undercut them too much, your reputation gets better. So they're more inclined to give you better deals down the road, and so that's
Right.
something like you could probably incorporate in your game for like a merchant thing as far as consequences go. But at the same time, I don't think you're a terrible game master if you don't get that simulationist about it, where you're tracking every little thing that the players are doing, and you have like this web of causation, like you're the actual god of the universe. No,
Right. Right. Right.
you're still a human. Do what you can do, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I agree that it's more for social encounters, but I do think a properly designed mega dungeon will offer that. Now, that being said, if you had you will have these issues with bottlenecking though, where they didn't figure out this one clue, so they're not going to be able to unlock the door to get to level 7 or whatever. You're going to have to deal with that. Like, what does that mean? Hopefully you have a group of players that are willing to, like, well, let's spend some of our hard-earned treasure to talk to a sage. What a great way to drop an easy clue. Like, you're going to spend
Right.
10,000 gold pieces, and the game master is going to tell you the answer. I think that's fair. It's a good exchange.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, no, that works. It's one of those things. I really liked the Because and So videos. I think Professor DM's was just a little better than the first one that came out, but that's only because I think he has a better camera. Um, but I do see. I think so. I guess what I'm saying is kind of one of the things they were talking about is it seemed to be over sort of this campaign period, not necessarily in the dungeon or during the hex crawl or what have you. Sort of, it seems to be bigger elements, of the story that do this. And I don't think it always has to be social. I keep saying social, but it doesn't always have to be social. There's a very um had your characters not, fought the fire, right, in episode 3 or whatever, that street and maybe some more would have burned down, right? And then
Right.
people would have reacted to you guys differently. But you guys helped put the fire out, therefore you gained renown, and now you have a little bit of an easier time, when you're looking for things in town, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a good way. And I also think you can do so. I was talking. Hang on, my everything's blowing up behind me, and I'm really trying to concentrate. So I apologize. Um, we were talking earlier about Because and So, and I said how that's really Act Two. So I think it can be that can actually be a tool not for planning a campaign because you can't really plan a story, but you have control of the first part of that first session, right? And then, although here's the thing, when you start a campaign, do people just start at the dungeon door, or does something happen and make your players want to go do shit?
Oh, I'll tell you what I did with Lamentations of Elemental Evil campaign. I made an announcement. Hey guys, I want to run Temple of Elemental Evil, but I want to use Lamentations of the Flame Princess as the game engine. Some old school hardline like BX guys are like, "Oh, I've always wanted to try Lamentations." I'm like, "Okay, giddy up," and I go, "Okay, here's the story thus far." Many generations ago, the temple was this evil place. There was a war to crush it. I didn't. I took it out of Greyhawk. I put it in my own. The kingdom of Arn and the kingdom of Verburn, along with the dwarves, aligned themselves and they destroyed the temple. Um, Generations gone by, Cold War, people have forgotten about the Borderlands, and now there's strange stuff going on, and people are afraid the temple's waking up. You're on your way to Hamlet as a group of adventurers interested in seeing if you can earn some coin in this untamed land. And then I started them off in a Lamentations module from the Grindhouse box set referee's guide called The Stranger Storm, where they show up to this inn that's on the crossroads on the way to Hamlet, and some crazy stuff happens. They ended up burning it down. My buddy killed a 12-year-old. Well, it was a changeling looking like a 12-year-old girl. But anyway, we don't need to get into the details of that.
Yeah.
But that's how I started. I just said the temple's, like I said, the temple's the source of all evil. That was part of the theme. And then as they were going through, I started dropping like these hints about what they were experiencing. So when they went to the Mo house, I added flavor with like this musty smell and seeing mushrooms everywhere, because people who've played Temple of Elemental Evil know Zuckmoy, the demon goddess of fungi, is at its center, right? So she's like the big bad. And then whenever they went into the trading post, I would always say this: "All right, yeah, it's dark, it's a little damp. You get this weird musty odor, kind of like peat." Always would say that. For a while, they didn't pick up on it. Then one day, someone was like, "You know, it always smells the same when we go in there, and it kind of smells like the Moat House." And they're like, "Holy shit, they're cultists," you know. So,
Yeah.
but that's how I did it.
Right on.
And it wasn't like a big to do. Like I didn't have to have like this flashy, oh god, it's Skeletor, and you got to go in there and
Right.
defeat him. No, I mean, you could do that if you wanted, I
Right.
guess, but
So I have this, and I don't know. I mean, I'm sure I could start any game out with, hey, you guys meet in a tavern or you do whatever. But for whatever reason, I feel like I've got to do something to them first. You know what I mean? Here's the thing. We were talking about an appendix N earlier, right?
yeah,
And you were saying always keep appendix N back here. I think our own personal appendix N at this point in our lives doesn't even resemble, it doesn't come close to resembling what the original appendix
I
N
agree
is,
with you.
not
Yeah,
not just in content, but in the form of media, right? I truly believe that we are like when you would play role playing games as a kid, especially the fantasy games, you were really emulating mostly Tolkien quest novels, right? Or then Dragonlance, and it was the quest, and you had this thing, and you were
yeah, I agree with
nobody,
that.
and you,
Yep.
yeah. And I think now people, especially in the US, I probably in most of the rest of the world as well, we have this sort of innate understanding of storytelling from a TV or movie perspective, right? It's just the way it works. To the point where, Joseph Campbell, the hero's journey, he didn't make up the hero's journey and then apply it to things. He recognized the hero's journey in almost
Right.
every story, right? And then since then, that's been dissected, da 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 da. And then now it's story beats, and you can't use any of those for like a role playing game, really. There's some of them you can look for, but that being the case, even in my mind, I feel like, well, I've got to do something to get the players off their ass to go do a thing, right? Like I was playing with the kids, or not too long ago, and I just copied Diablo, right? A giant hole falls, your town falls into it, demons are coming out of the sky. And we had played for about 15 minutes where just them kind of fooling around and me kind of teaching them the rules. And it was huge. And I do have this, and I think it's because of my appendix N that there's got to be some kind of what makes them leave. You know what I mean? Why? Maybe that's weird. It's a story gamer in me, what have you. You know what I mean? But I like, even if the person doesn't know anything about their character, even if they're OSRing it and it's just a set of numbers, it's in my head. I want them to have a reason to go out and do this shit, Um, yeah, and then after that, you can't control anything, right? Like after that, pretty much the players take over, and you're just kind of like a pinball machine. They're bouncing off of your world and running into your dungeons, and all that. And you can do little things to kind of keep them, in there, but good
Yeah.
luck, good
No,
luck.
I hear you. I don't have a problem with in fact, I like it when someone says this is what my character is. It has some sense of motivation or identity beyond I'm a fighter, I'm an elf. Uh I do like that. I just think one of the problem, and this is why like I'm not like as hardcore OSR as a lot of people are, but I just do not want the 5-page backstory. I think a lot of people,
Fuck yeah,
I think a
agreed.
lot of people mistake melodrama for role playing. You know what I mean? You can be just, hey, I'm a charismatic fighter. I'm going to go out and try to make a buck as a mercenary. That's my backstory. I'm a first
Right.
level fighter. I've had some training. I'm charismatic. I think I can make a buck being a mercenary. That's
Hmm.
my backstory. I think, and that's fine. Like 3 sentences. And all that backstory too. Just as a quick aside, can be pulled from your stats.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think too many people mistake melodrama for role playing and good storytelling when it's not. But that being said, um, I don't have a problem with players not really truly having a motivation, just being like, hey, I just want to go out, get the goal, get the experience, and like, make a tougher
Yeah.
character because
And
I am in that sort of school of thought that your backstory is actually, especially for playing OSR, your backstory is levels 1 through 4. Once you
I
hit level
absolutely
4,
agree with that.
I hope you actually have your own motivations, and at that point, I'm reacting to you.
Right.
So
Yeah, for me, I've always said, especially, and I think it's different for different games. Okay, I want to be real clear about that. I think it's different for different games and different
agreed,
systems.
absolutely,
But
100%.
when I'm running old school essentials, don't bring me your 5-page fucking backstory.
Right? Yeah,
Your back, see, you're absolutely correct. Your backstory is levels 1 through 3. You have a background. You know what I mean? And honestly, you roll on a fucking table for it to figure out what it is, and you'll
yeah,
never use it again. But that's that type of game,
yeah.
right? I think there are, and not all of these games are my favorites, so I'm not going to name them. But there are games I think that are designed from a narrative point of view, right? Like I think, I mean, Fate is a very storytelling kind of soft, in my opinion, soft storytelling, and I don't really like Fate that much.
Okay. I think
But I do. I Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think Free League, it's as kind of a story gamer. They're like kind of again using like a sliding scale. They're kind of in the middle, depending on what game you're talking about. Because when you look at their experience
Yep.
points, it's not about what you killed or what kind of treasure you got. It's like, did your character use his dark secret? Did he did this? Did he do this? So there's a lot of story game elements. I just think the game is crafted in a way that there's not this narrative control that the game master has. It's still with the players, and I think that's what makes Free League better. But I do
Yeah.
consider it a story game because of those
Fuck yeah.
elements. Max Liao disagrees with me though. He told me it's not a story game, and I'm like, I disagree with him. Yeah.
I my favorite free league game is Tales from the Loop. I don't
Yeah.
even know if you can die in that game. In fact, if I haven't read it in about a year, I haven't played it in longer. Um, I don't even know if there's like combat rules. You take like stress and trauma. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah. Well, you're playing
it
little
is
kids in the '80s, right? It's like a kids on
yeah, for
bikes
sure.
type game. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
kids on bikes kind. It's the most beautiful. Like the art in that is, I mean, it was art first before it was a book, right? Um, but it's that is one of the most story games I've played. But I wonder, we talk about that. Where would something like the Fantasy Flight narrative dice fit in? Because it's story dictated by mechanics, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that
Which
that's why
which
nobody likes it. They don't know what the fuck to do with it.
yeah.
See,
Well,
what's up, guys?
Yeah, well, that's actually a really good point because that's kind of like what the OSR does, right? Like, oh, we let the dice dictate the story, and then you got Fantasy Flight. Holy crap, dude! You just blew my mind. Yeah, is the Funky Dice OSR in disguise? Like,
Well,
I don't know.
I mean, that's the thing. Everybody, when I first told you about, and I know everybody hates the Star Wars narrative dice, and um, I loved it.
I thought it was
Um,
cool.
yeah, yeah. So and it's not loosey goosey. It's very mechanical.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You just get to describe how those mechanics are in play. So I think right there that is might be the perfect story game for OSR guys. And they'll all be like, "No, I'm not using those fucking dice."
Yeah,
I
yeah,
know
no.
exactly how all of them are, right? Fuck you, Trump. You know what I'm saying? Um
Make OSR great again.
We're shutting down WotC and auditing the whole fucking thing. I'm sending Elon in. And if you don't like it, I'm gonna tax you. I don't even hate the guy. I can't do the impression. My dude, Ivan, my 14-year-old son, does a great Trump.
Oh, does he?
Like he'll start doing it, and it's so funny because I'm like, and then we got in the cars. They were beautiful cars. He's got it. It's so good. Uh yeah, so I do think, I mean, that's probably why I love that system so much, and I know I can get a lot of hate from it, but and everybody was complaining, well, I don't want to have to go out and buy special dice. Motherfucker, when we were kids, the dice, one of the attractions to Dungeons and Dragons were the special dice that nobody had. You had to
Right.
go look for them. If you were lucky and lived near a city, you could go grab some, right? But you still had to look for them. So that's another one. I'm not playing that fucking game. Well, that's how much OSR can you get than having to go out and find these fucking dice that you don't have. You know what I mean?
That's funny.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but I will say another thing, and I'm going to say this is kind of a strike against sort of narrative games, and we always come down to this, right? Um, Narrative games can be really hard to run. And I think and when I say hard to run, what I mean is, like, for example, it's you don't know what your players are going to do. Certain things are attached to NPCs or certain events happening, and you don't want to, push your player to do this, but man, either they're going to have to do this or you're going to have to change this here. And it can be a lot of moving pieces that I actually think is easier if you're playing with people who like story games, right? Because it can
Yeah.
that
I
is
th-
kind of the thing.
my position on all of this for a while now has been it really depends on what the game table wants to do. And if everyone's on board to play a story game, then they're essentially saying I'm on board to be a little railroaded. And I'm going to
Yeah,
listen. I am promising to listen for those cues so I don't do this, I stay doing this, and that can be fun. Like, I know that's freaking heretical for an OSR guy to say, but it's true. I've played them. Gary has run them. I've had a great time when Gary's run those games,
yeah.
and that's to the audience, okay. But you're great.
I'll take it.
Yeah. You're a great game
More,
master.
more.
but,
Yes, my
but
coffee's been Irish all night.
um, but the but that is something that you have to deal with. And anyway, yeah.
Well, yeah, and here's the other thing is, if you held me at gunpoint, you said, Gary, you're only going to get to play 2 games or 1 game the rest of your life. You have to go to your shelf, your little small shelf, and pick it. It would probably be Old School Essentials or Dungeon Crawl Classics. Right? Like,
Oh yeah.
as much as I love new games and the new systems, and all that kind of thing, in my heart, I'd probably pick one of those 2 games. Depending on what time of year, would determine which one it was. I feel like DC's like DCC is a very light summertime game. You know, it's not too heavy. Uh, but yeah, there is a big difference, and the whole because so thing we were talking about earlier in story and all that. If your game doesn't need it, don't fucking use it. You know,
Yeah,
it's that simple. And your story talking about consequences can also be something as simple as, you know, you weren't able to save the virgin sacrifice, and now you got to go fight the demons
yeah,
because you
yeah.
did. You know what I mean? Because this, you did that. So it all makes sense. And you know what? Here's the thing: I've played games that other people have run who say they don't like story games. Yet there's always a little story in it. You know what I mean? Like there's always it always creeps in. I was watching. I wasn't watching. I had it on in the background. No, I would not pick D&D 24. um, but I was watching. What's the axe? The Gray Brother, whatever.
Oh yeah,
Fucking
the Great Brotherhood,
Alexander
I think.
McCrease. Yeah, the Gray Brotherhood. I had it on in the background. I was cleaning the house. I just had it on in the background. And there's that one fucking dude, man. Just like in every actual play, he's got a map with squares, and you can tell that like he would be perfectly willing just to run this sort of map game, right? Um, but there's that one dude who's got to get his pirate voice going, you know, or whatever that voice is. So I've never actually played in a game that didn't have story, even if it wasn't one of my games. And I think a lot of story gamers have issues with so-called story games because they don't maybe the GM doesn't understand how stories work, right?
That's yeah, I can see that because like you do need to have well, I mean, you're running through a narrative, so like you would
Right.
need something, and that's why going back to the top of the hour, or the topic of conversation,
Oh fuck,
your
you're gonna shit on
five
5 room
room
dungeons. God
dungeon
damn,
could
dude.
probably help you run a story game.
Yeah, it probably could. You know, there was another point I was making. You know, the 5 room dungeon can help you run a story game as long as you kind of know what the story is. And in that Trey and Matt video, one of the first thing he talks about is having the whiteboard and having the story beats, right?
Yeah,
In case most people know this, but in case you don't know what story beats are, is that there's a 12 to 14 different story beats. Every story has them. They're always in order. I don't want to say what all of them are because once you know what all of them are, you will always see it. Right. And this used to be just sort of a natural way stories happen. Now it's a formula that people use. So when I hear movies are formulaic, I've seen this all before. Well, yeah, we have, and you've seen it in that same order. The best movies, the best TV, you don't you don't feel it, right? You don't feel like you're being pushed through this machine. You cannot use those story beats to plan a campaign or an adventure, or you're definitely because some of those story beats call for your would if your players are characters, it would call for your players to feel a certain way or to take certain actions,
right, right,
and you just can't plan that. But if you do familiarize yourself with it, you can look for it, right? You can kind of see these as opportunities. Um, like for example, in between Act 2 and Act 3, right before the finale, is the Dark Night of the Soul. Right, that's what it's called. It's when the players or when the characters in the show are like at their lowest.
hmm
When you know your finale's coming, when you know it's around the corner, you can kind of kill their dog, right? Like give them a dog at the beginning of the game and kill it in the last encounter, right? You know, I'm serious, dude. Grandma, whatever, their favorite horse, do something that right that magic sword that character covets, it needs to get shattered before the finale, and they need to think
Oh,
that they need to think there's no hope. We're never how are we going to do this, da, da, da. So but you can't plan it, right? If you
but if
plan it, you're putting your emergent campaign on a timeline, and you're saying at this point right here, right, this thing, you can't do that. But if you know that right before the finale comes the Dark Night of the Soul, right, at that point, yeah, dude, fuck them, kill somebody's mom, dude. I don't care, you know, whatever, dude, whatever it takes, make them feel horrible, you know, like torture those characters. I
just
definitely,
real quick.
Yeah.
So why don't you want to play Lamentations of the Flame Princess with me?
You know what? Here's the thing about Lamentations. Um, I have no problem with Lamentations. I do think that the people who tend to, I think there's a difference between emotional distress and a sort of visceral horror, right? Like I don't mind making people sad. You know what I mean? And I don't, but I think, I think Lamentations lends itself to you stab them through the eyeball and it's hanging down and then the tentacles come out and they go right up his ass. You know what I mean? And that's just not,
I
I
read
just,
that module.
I thought you wrote it. I mean, I could play in something like that for a while, I think, but Lamentations, the system is just fine. There's
Yeah,
not a
it's
lot. It's
Lamentations isn't the system. It's everything
yeah,
else.
it's that's what I'm trying to say. When I talk about art and everything else, that's what colors the game. And Lamentations is just it's BX with a few different, kind
Yeah.
of things in there. I mean, it's a great system. The problem is, um, like I'm a fairly believe it or not, there. I know this is going to be hard to believe, but out in public and when I'm not with friends or surrounded by family, I'm a fairly polite, socially acceptable kind of guy.
So when you're
A
by
lot of times
yourself.
that, yeah, a lot of times that means I'm quiet, right? You know what
Hmm.
I mean? Like I just don't say shit. Um, my wife, who I have about 10 years on, um, refers to me as the modest old man because I really, I'm really kind of, so there's just certain things about that. Like it's really, I don't know how to explain it, dude. It's cultural, I guess. Everybody has different tastes, but for me, it's just that much too far. You know what I mean? And I don't think it should be
Yep.
banned. I don't think it, I don't think anything bad should happen to it. If you enjoy it, enjoy it. But I just think it's that, if you gave me 10 pieces of artwork from Lamentations, I would love 5 of them because they would push me right to that point. I'm like, oh, yeah, right. But the other 5 would probably be a little bit too much, you
Yeah.
know.
No, I get it.
And
I
then
get it.
when you go looking for adventures, when it's all like magic vaginas and, herpy
Not all
demons
of
or
it.
whatever the
Not
fuck.
all of it's that. Not
A
all of it
lot of
is
it
that.
though, but that's the stuff that's probably the most visible. That's what
Yeah.
when you start looking things up,
I
that
will
comes up.
run. I will run World of the Lost. It's a hex crawl through like I think Africa, and there's like this
Mhm.
caldera with like this weird dome over it, and there's stuff going on in there.
And that's another thing about Lamentations is the setting because it's real world. You know what I mean? I don't know. What's up, Brian James?
What's
What's
going
up,
on,
Doc
Brian?
Flamingo? Um, yeah, and I think maybe the sort of the realist world setting of it. If I'm gonna do fantasy, let's fucking do fantasy. Like my favorite fantasy is like Conan, like that dark,
Sure. Yeah. No, I get it.
sandal. Yeah. So it's just kind of one of those things. Matt, so I'm pretty much done with this. I think we're good. You don't railroad your players. 5-room dungeons
Are
suck. If
terrible.
you're one of these people, they're okay. If you're one of those people, um, give your give your player choices consequences. Um, I think the biggest thing, when we were talking about because and so, I really think it's helpful if you follow old Hankrin Fernell's advice. Only plan one session ahead, right? The session you're about to play, and your players are going to succeed or they are going to lose, and that should determine your next session. That
I
to
think
me
that's
is
fair.
because and so for OSR, right?
I would say have your procedures in place, so you can do like what happens next, kind of thing, depending on the environment where you are. I think I got nothing against. I got nothing against a five
The
room
flip through
dungeon.
review, but sorry, go ahead.
No, I know that's like my catchphrase. I got nothing against a flip through review, but I think the 5 room dungeon as a structure is better suited for, like, if you really want to have a story, it's better suited for something long term and just allow your players enough flexibility. And that's where you're getting into like the adventure path, um, Tracy Hickman bumping the players along this.
Yeah,
That is fine. We it goes without saying, so long as the players are on board and bought the ticket for the ride, this should be fine,
well,
if every dungeon I walk into has got 5 rooms, and I'm going to be
absolutely.
upset.
Absolutely. But when we talk about, we had that little dust up about narrative and dungeons and everything else. I do think that the modern player, I think even the modern player who played back in the day, I think there is an expectation of some kind of story. You know what I mean?
I think
Even if
that's
it's just
fair.
a
Yeah.
even and like here's the thing, it can come down to the difference between giving a players a list of rumors or telling your players, you're talking to the barkeep at the tavern and he's got one eye and he's wrinkly and he tells, and you can role play that out. That's really what the difference is. I would, playing an OSR game, I would hand the list to my players probably, or I would just kind of tell them, So it's definitely system related, but I don't think you could play heroic. I don't think you could. I think there are some games that you cannot play with an OSR mindset. With the
I
To
agree
me, the
with you.
OSR mindset, I would like. Do you think this is just an idea? It's almost like the mechanics. Well, it is like this. It's always going to be game over whatever story plot line, whatever that is. It is the game. It is the game mechanics. It is the pluses and minuses. It's the how many squares you can move on a map, and everything else is window dressing. And it does. And if it doesn't get in the way of their dungeon fun, and gives them a little bit extra to go to, you're going to be a great dungeon master. If it gets in the way of them killing goblins, you're fucked. They're just going to fucking hate you, and that's just
Yeah,
the way
yeah.
it
Well,
is.
I think I think you're right about that. Like, I don't think heroic would work well if we didn't have like an issue to deal with each session. You know what I mean? If otherwise, I think we would be sitting there like bumps on a log a lot of the times. I know you want us to like create our own scenes, and I've been trying to do that, but like we definitely need to have. And I think now that we're uncovering some of the mystery, we're going to have a little bit more, be a little bit more proactive.
Yeah.
But like, I know,
No, I hear you.
a good
I think
example.
you're right. I think you're right.
A good example of this is so Legacy Magneto on the server. He ran Brian and I through, and Paladin, if he's still here, through like a 6 month, 9 month Song of Ice and Fire game.
Yeah.
That's the surprisingly crunchy, but we built our own house, and then we did these, and every session was a problem we had to solve. And what was interesting, and tie it into our theme for tonight's discussion, uh, the problem was created because of something we did last session. So there was always this
Right.
consequence. Like we convinced the king that this has to happen. Awesome, we succeeded. Great. Well, now we pissed off this other guy who didn't want us to do that thing, and now he's doing this other thing, and we got to figure that out now, and so
Right.
on and so forth. Every session was this problem we had to solve, and then we did it, and then the next session was this new
Yeah.
thing. It was great.
So, hey, Brian. Brian wrote superheroes have the comic book model, episodic and a goal each session. It does kind of. So the way I think of comics is there is sort of the large overarching story, right? Um, and then you have the stories within that lead up to or the encounters, I guess you could say, that lead up to the finale. So it used to be back in the day. I mean, most comic books themselves were one and done. You'd open a comic book, you'd read it. Shit, sometimes you get two stories, right? Beginning, middle, and end. But over the past at least 20 years, if not longer, what you find is there's these sort of bigger story arcs, and then there are these smaller, like let's say you're going to go for 2 years on a comic, you're going to have 4 6 issue stories that all take place within this leading up to the culmination. And each issue, if it's written by somebody really good, and by say like Jason Aaron, I think Jason Aaron is the master of the single issue comic, then every issue is going to have a beginning, middle, and end. So you've got beginning, middle, and end in an issue. You've got beginning, middle, and end in a 6 issue arc, and then you have, I don't know that that can. I mean, that's kind of what I'm doing, Brian. It's kind of what the row is supposed to be. Is there is this larger story, and the idea was is that I would leave things out that they'd want to explore, look into, or this and that. And I think it's not, it has nothing to do. My players are great, and I think we've been having fun. But I think because we started out and I set everybody, here's your goal, here's the people. I think where I messed up is I connected clues to people as opposed to clues. I think that's my big fucking mistake. You know what I mean? I really think that's my huge mistake is if the players don't want to go interact in a social fashion. So I'm having to rework, but it's been great. It's taught me a lot because like I said, that last group of players that I had, not the OSC guys, but when, everyday heroes and they were role players. Like they were up in there and it was so much fun. The story was really simple. Everybody understood their character. In fact, we didn't do backstories, but because it all took place in an area where they were supposed to grow up in, we just did little things like I had made a bunch of the sort of power player NPCs. So we connected each character to like this is your family or this is the you know what I mean. So every character had like personal stakes. They're kind of rooted in this place. And that game was great, but all 3 of those players were really into it was a 1970s small town Texas dirty magic, crime kind of game. Brian played that with us and Brian is a role player.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
he is. He loves that shit. I'm sure he could do the dungeon crawl. You know what I mean? I've never done that. Every time I've played with him, it's had a story.
yeah.
So, it's just I think online games, it's really hard sometimes to gauge. You're not seeing people's faces, you're not
Oh
getting that
yeah,
reaction.
yeah.
Um oh, at most playing the landscaper has a mask on even on his goddamn computer screen. Like I've
He's just
never
getting
seen the dudes.
he's just getting into character.
I know, but what I'm saying is like I don't know if he's having fun. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, yeah,
but and I don't mean to pick on those guys because that's the same thing that happens if you play OSC online, if you
yeah.
play any game online, people are going to be like, I don't want to, So it's hard, and you got to get your footing. And I think it's good practice because I want to play games with a lot of people, so it's good to get new folks. Song of Ice Fire, I think. Sorry, my cat just screwed up my.
Let's see, it often goes so far. Oh, I see. Ed wants to find 3 Lamentations modules for you to check out. Change your mind about it. Tower of the Stargazer is definitely one of them. That's a classic. And then let's see, what's this one from Brian? To your previous point about a song, I think that is a great way to run the story, but it is a story that is crafted by our last session's actions. I loved it. Yeah, so that's something Gary's been saying periodically throughout our live stream about just kind of prepping that one encounter, that one situation, and then whatever happens, happens, and then that leads you into the next one. So there he is. There he is. Oh, that guy. The other guy was on the Lamentation, or excuse me, Song of Ice and Fire game. That was an awesome game. Legacy did such a great job of it. But anyway,
Could you do a? I know we only have a few minutes left. Could you do a Game of Thrones style game with people? Let's say we were going to use OSE, right? And we wanted to do something Game of Thrones ish. Could you do that without a heavy story?
uh, no, because that would be all about faction play, and I wouldn't use OSC. You know what I would want to use? All
Hmm.
honesty, I'd want to use
Axe.
No. Well, that could work, but actually, I want something a little grittier and a little bit more dangerous. So to really put um, uh, uh, the pressure and any like serious combat would have high stakes. I would use something like Lion and Dragon by RPG Pundit. You're not guaranteed when you gain a level, you roll on a chart, kind of like with Shadow Dark. But in his game, you're not guaranteed to get more hit points when you get a new level. You'll get
Yeah, right.
one, and then you might get an extra die if you roll on the chart and get that. And it's very, very much rooted in it's like an alternative Britain, so it's like inspired by the Rose War. So you have these competing people looking to become the king, and all the families. So you could, if I remember, Dark Albion actually has stats and rules for developing your own house, I believe. If not, if it's not there, it's in another one of his supplements. I'd have the players make a house, and I'd be like, okay, who are you allying with? And we would just play like a war game slash politics game, and just sort of see what happens. But I think you could do it with an OSR game, but you would need a story rooted in factions, where the overarching thing is something like everyone's vying for the throne.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
absolutely. But I do think I think that the modern player wants those kind of things. I mean, OSR is a the niche of a niche, and I do think I think that the majority of players, even if they're new and you don't like them and you want them to get off your lawn, I think they expect some kind of something, consequences and NPCs and and it goes too far because also everybody wants their own, their own arc and their own superhero story. And those things are completely fitting in certain games, certain genres. They don't fit in I don't think they fit in the OSR. And I
no,
don't think I would try to, I would never. All these great storytelling things that I use and like the frameworks I try to use to design campaigns would be completely lost on an OSR game, much in the same way they're lost if you play any science fiction game where your characters have a spaceship. You know what I mean? It's like
yeah,
I have this whole thing planned out. Well, we're going to Alderaan before it blows up. Well, fuck
right,
you. You know what I mean?
yeah.
It's just, that's it. But that, oh, god damn it, dude. Something's always fucking with me in this house, dude. I don't get 3 minutes without something touching me and wanting some shit. And now it's the cat. Oh. All right, man. You're going on vacation next week. We won't be here.
That is true. Yes, yes. So next week is the 14th. It's Valentine's Day, so do something romantic, but not with us. We won't be
It
here.
is. It is my. It is my Valentine's Day. It is my anniversary at the same time, and I'm catching attitude. We're married. We're married, bro. And I'm catching attitude because I didn't ask her to be my Valentine. The fuck, bro. Like, we got to get a lawyer to break up. Like, what the fuck? I got to ask you anything for? You know what I mean? Like, shit's gonna get heavy if this doesn't work out. I kind of assumed you were my Valentine. It's not like I'm buying some shit. I know I gotta buy flowers, candy, something silky, something random that seems thoughtful. Right? That's what you gotta do. I gotta come up with something that seems thoughtful.
Yeah, well, I'll be
Do you
spending
remember when I
Valentine's
was
Day on a
single?
plane,
Do you
so
do you remember
vaguely.
when? Yeah, exactly. Right. And you're putting your whole family on a plane.
Yep. Wait,
Yeah,
we
I'm.
this year is actually a lot better. So previous years, we'd have to fly to like North Carolina or something. There'd be a changeover and then fly, and there's always something wrong, and we're having to run across, an airport, and I hate that. And my wife, she hates it. She's like, when we went and did a vacation with her family, it's like this. Long story why we did that, but she actually told her sisters and her mother, you're about to go flying with Matt. get ready, and because I'm like really like we gotta go now. Now we're doing this. Like I'm type AAA when I'm traveling. Like this is what's happening. No, you cannot grab a coffee because we have to make sure we're at this gate at this time.
Yeah,
So, but this year there's a new airline that is a direct flight to where my parents are. So it cuts our travel time in half. There's no changeovers. I just have to give my son like a tablet to watch a movie for the next 3 hours, and we're good. I'm very excited.
dude, I can't imagine like having to put all my kids on a plane. Get the fuck out of here, dude. Oh, there'd be fights. At the very least, there would be a fight. At the very least. So my wife appreciates it when I give her 3D6 GP for Valentine's Day. Um, I would I would I would get in trouble for that because that's not very
I would
thoughtful.
too. I would too.
Like if I came home with a gift certificate, it could be for $15,000, right? But it's a gift certificate. I'm fucked. Like no, I can't. I can't do it. The boys. Yeah, I'll throw cash at them. Go away. You bother me,
Yeah.
boy. So
Uh, Brian, yes, we will. My wife and I are actually leaving on the Friday, so there will be a Thursday game next week for Lamentations,
yeah,
but there
I'm
won't
gonna.
be a row game because we'll be away, and then there'll be a Lamentations and then row. So the
Yeah,
row it's like a month hiatus. So, but
skipping a
yeah,
week on the road, and yeah, and that team has almost. I'm gonna give a hint. If any of the players are watching right now, I'm just gonna give. I'm gonna give one. So you don't have to do anything. You don't have to do anything. But there's a couple things that haven't been looked into, right? Who do want to burn shit down, right? Like who wants that nasty ass place in the maze? Um, the codex or the cipher that Ursa is looking at is pretty major. And you asked your players a question in the game last night. You said, "Do you think this is?"
what did I
And
say?
I,
I forgot. I
uh,
think I remember. I think I remember.
yeah, and I would say that is yes, that you guys should investigate that, even if it's not what you think. And yeah, yeah, you should investigate. Speaking of which, um, did you read the invention rules yet from
Oh,
Hero?
I'm going to do that this weekend. I'm going to make a video. Oh, and on that point, I don't think he's actually watching, but there's this guy who's been commenting on my deep dive videos, Bright Crazy Star 93. He's apparently been playing the Marvel game for like decades. And he's
Yeah,
like, he's been very kind. He like, because I've made a few mistakes apparently, but he's pretty cool. I just want to give him a shout out. Hey, thanks for watching the videos, man. I really appreciate the conversation and the comments. Definitely giving me some food for thought. But I'm going to do another video. I was originally thought I was
that's
done
great.
with that deep dive, but I think I'm going to do two more. One on fortresses and hideouts, and another one on the crafting rules.
That's I
So
spent today. I read the crafting rules. They're incredibly simple for
yeah,
heroic. They're a bit more detailed for Marvel. And then what else did you say? Bases.
yeah.
Um, I went through the bases stuff today. And I think when down the road when we do the Rocket Age, I think we might start by having you guys build a base.
Oh, that's a good
Like that
idea.
might be how it starts. You know
That
what I
that's like
mean?
a good way for us to build. It's like team building exercise too.
Yeah, we might. I'm thinking maybe session zero would be because I thought Rocket City was going to come first, so I kind of know where that's going, and I'm definitely adjusting it. Like as we play this game, there is. I think Rocket City is the most direct superhero. Here's the bad guy. Go beat him up. Why was you know what I mean? Because that's the one that to me that was the superhero game. That was where we were going to start. You
Mm,
know, so I've got quite a bit for that, but I'm really looking forward to it. So
yeah, I'm looking for. I really like. I want to see where this experiment goes. For those who don't know, the whole point of the row is we're starting in the pulp era and we're going to build our own superheroes universe. So we're going to go through the various eras of comics. And Gary knows a bunch about comic books, so he's the perfect guy to do it. So I'm curious, see where this
Yeah,
goes.
and I think as it gets bigger, like right now, I don't think I could really do it. But I think once we hit like the 60s and the rocket age, I think it would be possible for me to like have our regular game and even possibly run another group. Because at that
Right.
point, the world, right now we're in a neighborhood.
Yeah.
That's really, man, have you ever done I've done small towns, I've done cities. I've never just taken a spot in a city and been like, okay, this is where our campaign. I mean, you guys have played in the equivalent of about 12 city blocks,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
and mostly it's been on one street.
Yeah.
And I've never done that before. Just kind of happened. It was nice.
Yeah. Yeah. I've never done that either. It's interesting. Yeah.
Yep. All right, man. Well, have a good time on your vacation. Um,
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Uh,
sir. Thank you.
and everybody, I think our watch has ended. Thanks for joining the conversation. I hope you found it interesting. Hit like, subscribe, bell icon. If you're on Rumble, I don't think anybody is, but if you're on Rumble, please follow. They're actually a little bit more generous at Rumble, and they got this new program. If I can get 100 follows, I'm like 85 away. But if I can get 100 follows, we might actually be able to pay for all this. But anyway, thanks for joining us, everyone. Have a great weekend and happy gaming. Let's see, did this work? Hold on a second. There we go.
It's not going. We're at the bottom, bro. Dude, get up. I think I heard.